Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a fascinating topic. To disarm your victim, use selective honesty and generosity. This is Law 12 from our series. Over the next few minutes, I'll be sharing some insights on how these strategies can be effectively applied. Let's get started. Let's consider the power of a sincere and honest move. Sometimes, just one genuine act can outweigh dozens of dishonest ones. It's about the impact of authenticity. Showing honesty and generosity can really break down barriers. When you approach others with open-hearted gestures, it creates an environment of trust. Even the most suspicious people tend to lower their guard when they see genuine sincerity. This idea ties into our overall theme, that integrity and openness can transform relationships and build a foundation of trust that's hard to break down. Remember, a single act of honesty can open the door to much stronger connections. Imagine the Greeks approaching Troy, carefully planning their strategy. A well-timed act of kindness can be just like that, opening a breach in your opponent's defenses. Once they believe you're on their side, thinking you're a friend, it becomes much easier to influence or manipulate them. Distraction is really your most powerful weapon here. When you give a gift or even share an honest confession, you're creating an emotional distraction that can cloud judgment. This is what I like to call the Trojan horse effect. It's about using seemingly innocent gestures to gain entry and then, once inside, having the opportunity to influence from within. So the core idea is to leverage kindness and distraction strategically, turning what seems like an act of goodwill into a subtle way to gain control. It's all about timing, trust, and emotional manipulation, fitting seamlessly into the overall theme of persuasion and influence. So here we see a fascinating moment involving Capone, who, because of his experience with deception, was actually expecting dishonesty in this situation. But what happened next was quite the surprise. He was utterly stunned by Lustig's honesty. Instead of taking advantage of Capone's trust, Lustig returned the borrowed $50,000 in full, which was quite unexpected. Capone, feeling a mix of surprise and perhaps a bit of admiration, immediately trusted Lustig even more. Out of gratitude, or maybe a sense of obligation, he gave Lustig $5,000 as a gift. Interestingly, this gift was actually Lustig's real goal all along. Now, this story highlights an important lesson about deception and trust. Lustig, a master con artist, managed to pull off something that seemed honest on the surface, but in reality was part of a bigger plan. This example ties into our overall theme, understanding how deception works and recognizing the subtle ways trust can be manipulated. It reminds us that appearances can be deceiving, and even the most unexpected honesty can serve a hidden purpose. So in this story, we see that he gave the ruler of Yu some very valuable gifts, precious jade and fine horses. Now, these weren't just for show. They were meaningful tokens of respect and alliance. The key point here is how these gifts influenced the ruler's decision. Blinded by the generosity, the ruler ignored his advisors, warnings, and granted passage without hesitation. This highlights an important concept. When you give something valuable, it often encourages the recipient to reciprocate or act favorably. But it also shows that generosity can sometimes cloud judgment. As a result, Duke Xian took advantage of this situation. He conquered Guo, which was his original target, and then, on his way back, he also conquered Yu, retrieving his gifts in the process. This story ties directly into our overall theme of give to take. It illustrates how giving can be used strategically, but it also warns us about the risks of being too trusting when dealing with others, generosity. Let's talk about the concept of the transgression, the overt deceiver. Sometimes, when you're dealing with someone who's trying to manipulate, they might think that refusing to give even a little can be a tactic. But in reality, being too stingy or trying to take everything at once usually backfires. If you try to take everything immediately, you often end up with nothing at all. That's why it's important to remember. You have to spend a little honesty, a small amount of trust, to buy a lot in return. Building trust isn't about grand gestures all the time. It's about consistent, small acts of honesty that add up. Now let's look at the transparency trap. If someone is known for always being deceitful or overly stingy, people will start to see right through them. Their victims will keep their guard up because they anticipate deception. When you're predictable in your dishonesty, your lies lose their impact. They become just another part of the background noise. The key takeaway here is that transparency, or at least a semblance of honesty, can actually be a powerful tool. It prevents you from falling into this trap and maintains your influence over others. Finally, the predictable liar. When someone's deceitfulness becomes predictable, it's a double-edged sword. People learn what to expect from you, and that predictability diminishes your power. If your lies are always the same or too obvious, others stop believing in you altogether. The overall theme here is about the importance of balance, using honesty wisely and avoiding patterns that make you transparent. Because, in the end, trust is built on consistency and authenticity, not on manipulative tactics that can be easily spotted. Now, let's talk about some key strategies for wielding power effectively. First, admitting a minor flaw or mistake can actually work in your favor. It makes you seem more human and approachable, which helps hide any darker, larger motives you might have. People tend to trust those who appear genuine and honest. Next, there's the concept of emotional confession. When you give a gift, it creates a sense of equality and friendship. This gesture makes others feel obligated to you, and that softens their rigidity and suspicion. It's a subtle way to build rapport and trust. Then, we have the idea of a calculated gift. Offering a gift at the right moment, especially during initial interactions, can establish a baseline of trust. Starting off on a positive, generous note makes it much harder for others to turn against you later. Finally, first impressions are crucial. The way you present yourself initially sets the tone for all future interactions. Making a good first impression can open doors and create opportunities that might otherwise be closed. Connecting all these points, the overall theme is about strategic honesty and generosity, using these tools wisely to build trust and influence from the very beginning. Sometimes, being openly dishonest can actually work in your favor. It might catch people off guard because they see you as bold or daring, and they may even think they understand you completely. So, in some cases, embracing that rogue reputation can be a strategic move. However, if you're already known for deceit, suddenly switching to honesty can seem suspicious rather than generous. People might wonder what your real motives are. It's important to remember that when honesty backfires, it can damage trust and credibility. So, while being honest is generally the best policy, it needs to be timed and executed carefully, especially if your reputation precedes you. This ties into our overall theme of navigating honesty and deception wisely in strategic interactions. Now, let's take a moment to look at the sources behind the images we've shared today. These images come from a variety of reputable sources, each contributing a different perspective to our overall message. For example, the first image with the open hand reaching toward the sunburst is from crosswalk.com, symbolizing hope and openness. The handshake picture from FreePic.com highlights trust and agreement, which are essential themes in our discussion. The image from Wikipedia of the sunrise represents new beginnings and enlightenment. Then, we have a historical photo from the Mob Museum, reminding us of the importance of understanding history and deception, which connects to the mask's image from davidmselroy.org. Masks often symbolize concealment or deception, tying into our theme of authenticity versus illusion. The ancient vase from Wikipedia adds a cultural and historical dimension, while the final image of the mask underscores the idea of hidden identities and facades. All these visuals and their sources remind us that the concepts we've explored are supported by a broad array of perspectives: history, trust, hope, deception, all interconnected. Recognizing these sources helps us appreciate the depth and richness of the ideas we've discussed.